Welcome back, everybody, to Extended Cut. So happy you guys are with us. Today's episode is brought to you all, still by Easter's.
Because he's still risen.
He's still risen.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually change from year to year. He doesn't go back in and then rising. No, it's
not just an Easter event.
Yeah, it's done. It's done, and we can live in it. So, y'all, today we have a super fun episode for you. We're talking about donkey missions.
Let's go.
Donkey, man. It was so hard for me not to yell donkey in the middle of you.
The Shrek donkey.
Yes, in the middle of you preaching on Sunday.
Denzel did.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Okay, cool. Good. Thank you, Denzel. So PD, donkey missions, man. We've been going through the book of Luke, and now you're just kind of coming out of left field.
With a massive change.
Yeah, and I will say this. This is probably one of the funnest titles that I've heard you have for a sermon series.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? My titles in Luke have not been creative at all. So Donkey Missions is actually the title stolen from a book written by Matt Keller.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On 1 Samuel 9 and Saul's Call and everything else. And so, and my friend Joel Sosa, he's the pastor of Echo City Church up in Thornton. Mm-hmm. He kind of brought me into it. They said, what's the point? I think was their sermon titles. Yeah. And he said, and then I was like, but Donkey Missions, how can you not?
It's kind of great.
I was like, we got to just do it.
It's kind of great.
Right. So, so I was just hooked when I heard the name. I didn't even need to hear, because it almost preaches itself, right? It just takes care of itself. And so I was like, that's a fun title. It kind of communicates the point, because you feel like a donkey when you're on a donkey mission. It's like you got to chase a donkey. You feel like a donkey. It's awful. Mm-hmm. Now, I did get a call from a friend in DC who warned me that in the 90s, donkey meant something else entirely down in South Florida. And so it was not appropriate.
Oh yeah, no.
But it was so for people who are thinking that direction in my generation, I apologize. That is not in any way, shape, or form the illusion that we're going for.
Yep.
So
that makes sense. Yes, not at all. Tell us about it. Donkey missions. What was the synopsis of what you said? Because I do have some questions for you, but we want to catch people up on.
Yeah, so we'll bring people up to speed.
Episode yet?
Yeah. So basically, I set Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 as kind of the verse for the series, that there's a thing for everything and the season for everything, and God has established seasons for the purpose of having kind of sub-seasons within it. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about seasons, even though God has ordained them for a specific time and for a purpose, mm-hmm. they don't always make sense. Yeah. In fact, a lot of times they don't make sense. Mm-hmm. You can find yourself in a senseless season, in a season that seems pointless. Sometimes it's just in a season where your character is being tested, you're being stretched, you're being pushed, you're being pulled in all different directions, mm-hmm. right? We know about those.
No. Never.
Church planting, anyone?
I've never experienced. It's been the easiest job ever.
Yeah, exactly. So the seasons don't make sense, and so you start to think, okay, well, what illustrations in the Bible really show somebody doing something that's out of sync with the moment, that tests and refines their character, exposes things that are in them, and so we chose Saul and his donkey mission, mm-hmm. Largely because it's kind of a space not very often traveled. And, mm-hmm. To be quite honest with you, jumping into donkey mission, I can tell our congregation is not so enthused about Luke all the way. Now we're going to...
Luke, what? No. Luke's amazing. I love it. Totally.
We had a group of people meeting the other day, and we were talking about our favorite book of the Bible, and it was like every book of the Bible but Luke. It was so funny.
I remember that.
But yeah, so it's going. But we are. The truth be told, we're excited about Luke. We're learning. We're growing. We're understanding his mission. Mm-hmm. But it is nice to take a break and then to jump back into it with full throttle again.
Yeah, no, that's real.
And we'll do that in May.
I love that. I absolutely love it. You talked about these donkey missions. This place where God's going to call us, something's going to get revealed, and you feel like a donkey while you're doing it. You're like, what the heck's going on? Why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
it was funny. I was talking to somebody after service yesterday about a donkey mission that we shared that actually involved a donkey.
You did have a donkey mission.
I did.
A Christmas
I had
donkey.
a Christmas
You had a
donkey
Christmas
mission,
donkey.
And we were laughing about it. Yeah. So this donkey mission, this was back when we were in Sterling, and we did this amazing thing. We had these animals. We had this nativity scene, and
the Christmas Eve service.
Yes, Christmas Eve service.
Yeah.
And we had a donkey. They brought a donkey out on stage. And when you see a donkey in real life and try to get it to do something it doesn't want to do, it makes you just appreciate the fact that Jesus rode one a lot more. Because there's this other thing that donkeys like to do when they're stressed, I guess. They like to poop a lot. And
they were pulling the donkey by the head.
Yes.
It posted up like in a cartoon.
Yes.
And then they had to drag it. They were dragging it off stage, and, and it got stressed out.
Yep. And we were renting from Dominion High School, that space, and somebody needed to clean up the donkey poop.
Yeah.
And myself and a couple other people got sent on a donkey mission.
You had a donkey mission.
we legitimately had a donkey mission.
Great memory.
So that was just one that we.
At least the camel never did it.
Yeah. Oh God. Thank the Lord. Yes. Camel missions. That's a whole nother. That's another level. That's a whole nother sermon series. But all that to say. Because that was a donkey mission I responded well to.
Yeah.
We laughed about it. We were and we talk about it to this day. It's a fun memory, right?
Yeah.
But there have been donkey missions that I haven't responded well to. You talked in the message about sometimes it reveals what God's already placed in you, and it's just a revealing of good character or something that is instilled that's there. But there's been times where I've seen the task that was the donkey mission. I've experienced the task. I've completed the task. But in my heart, I still felt like I was on that donkey mission.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage people, or how would you help people walk through knowing when the donkey mission's actually been completed? Yeah. Or they're still actually in it? Because the task doesn't always correspond to the mission itself.
Man, I'm so glad you brought that. I mean, we were talking about this earlier today about how we can be so task oriented that we feel like, well, I did it. Why isn't it over? Yeah. Right. Like I checked off this box. Why is there still pressure? Why the need to do more? Yeah. And so when we get task oriented, sometimes we can miss that the mission wasn't about the tasks, but it was about our heart. Yeah. Right. So if your heart still isn't caught up, you're still in maybe you're still in the mission. Yeah. But it might be helpful to understand, or just to kind of play with the language a little bit. Maybe donkey mission is the task and donkey season is the heart. Yeah. Because sometimes it can be done, the season can close, but your heart can still be chewed up about something. I remember actually the toughest donkey mission of my life. Well, I've had several very difficult seasons for extended periods of time, but one of them was when I was an executive assistant, because I'm not good at anything I'm not good at one task that an executive assistant would do, much less that being the full of my job. I get it. It was awful. It was a terrible experience for me and a terrible experience for the man that I was serving. I told him later, I said, that was the worst year of my life. And he said, mine too. So it was like that bad. Yeah. But after that season ended and I was going into campus ministry, it took a long time for my heart to heal from my sense of failure. It took a long time for my heart to recover from the struggle and the difficulty of that job and of that work and the kind of the things that were exposed in my heart and the way the enemy wanted to leverage it against me. Because, the devil's going to lie to you all the time. Yeah. And he's perfected a lot of those lies so that they kind of get in and they make a home. So it took a long time. So even though the executive assistant, even though the mission, the task of executive assistanting concluded in late 2009, it probably took another year and a half before I felt fully free in my heart. And I wish it had been faster. but it was like it was like it was like stair steps. It was like I felt relieved of pressure when my job changed and my work changed and I started doing things I was better at. Mm-hmm. But then I'd realize, oh man, I caught a bar. Like, it's kind of like if you ever walked out, if you've ever been on a hike.
Yeah.
I know you don't love hiking, but
I don't.
But like if you go, you can get burrs on your clothes.
Yeah.
So like you pick some off as you go, but then it's funny because like you can realize later, you're like, why is there a burr in my car? Like you can find them in like weird places for a long time, even after the mission, even after the hike was completed, you can still find it there. I was finding crap in my heart for a year and a half after I was done with that job.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Gotcha.
So
once
I don't think I answered the question.
I think you did.
Recognize that it's not over yet.
Mm-hmm. But when your heart catches up, that's when it's actually over.
That's when it's done.
So you have your mission and you have the season. Mm-hmm. The donkey mission might be the catalyst. So for you, it was the mission was the executive assistant job. The season was not only the executive assistant job, but the healing and the cleansing of the gunk in your heart.
Yeah, that was revealed.
That was revealed through it for that year and a half period.
Yeah,
So
and I would say that while I don't think that you can't necessarily speed it up, right? Because God ordains the seasons, but you can do things that cooperate with Him in the time that He's set. Does that mean like you could drag it on, but I don't think you can necessarily speed it up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So it's like. Or maybe you can heal a cut by putting antibiotic cream on it. Mm-hmm. Like, and spiritually, the equivalent would be like continuing to follow Jesus,
talking to someone,
getting with God's people, and continuing to engage in God's mission, but not like withdrawing from those things until you get healthy, because those things are the balm that God has created to heal our heart, and to help us make sense of the season that we're in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. So get with people, get in the presence of God.
Broken record, right? Like,
it's just like, man, this is sounding really.
Get in the presence of God. Get with some people who can help you, and stay on the mission.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, it's funny you say that. Speaking of staying on mission, I got another one for you. I love what you did on Sunday. You talked about something hard, and you sat down to do it. You hopped up on the stage. I thought it was great. I was like, I love that.
That was totally on plan. Megan was like, what is happening?
I saw her face, and I was just like, oh, this is hilarious. Like, that's great. So you hopped on stage to say the hard thing. And if you haven't listened to the message yet, the hard thing was saying sometimes it's easier if you're in a donkey season, maybe at work, or a donkey mission, maybe at work, to literally go find another job that might actually pay you more and bring you more benefits and just kind of avoid the situation altogether.
Dodge the donkey mission.
Right, you just dodge it, right? So how would you encourage people to stay in the mission or season even when there's an easy way out that looks real good, that's bringing awesome benefit, that's real nice? So how would you?
Man, that's such a great question. And we see in 1 Samuel 9 that Saul wanted to leave. Yeah. Right? Like he's kind of like, he's like, we should probably head back now. I don't want my dad being more worried about us than
the donkeys.
Yeah, like now he's going to be worried about two things. And then the servant's like, no, I mean, there's this man of God, there's this prophet, we could go see him and maybe he'll have something to, he could say something to help us. And Saul's like, yeah, we don't have anything really to, he's like, there's an easier way. Like, we could just be done. It turns out the areas that they were walking through, it was tough terrain. It was not easy. It was not easy work. And so it was a hard work. It was a difficult task. It was an annoying task. And it was easier just to go home where their food was, where their bed was, where their fun was. And so he was looking for the easy way out. I think that, he wanted to go home. And I think sometimes we want to do the same thing, right? Yeah. Take that easier job, take that easy way out. So I think the question was, how do we not take the easy way out? And
stay in the mission.
Yeah. God, I said it too early in the podcast today, but I think it's staying with God's people. I think that every person needs to find wise Christians who love God and understand how he works and seek counsel when they're making a difficult decision or they find themselves in certain kinds of donkey missions, right? Like if you got a baby and it's, you have a baby, it's so exciting, but then they wake you up all night and you got to feed them and you're figuring out how to burp them and like all the diapers and like you're learning all of that. That's a season, where you like everybody would agree. No, you raise this thing. Like you commit to the task. Yeah. You do this thing. It's not going to last forever. Take care of the child. It will grow up. It's going to grow you up in the process. Anybody who's looking would say, stay in there. Come on, keep going. It's not as clear when it's something like a job. It's not as clear when it's something like financial difficulty or relational difficulty with adults. Like that's where it starts. That's where wisdom really, we're having a wise men and women in your corner who love Jesus and know how he works become irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for the person who, honestly, if there's not internal motivation to stay in, because we do this thing as Christians sometimes we're like, well, we make it unnecessarily hard on ourselves because we imagine that God wants it to be hard for us, so we make it harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Your wise Christian mentors would be able to say, you're making this harder on yourself than you need to. Like, jump, go get another job, right? Sell your car, pay off some debt, like whatever, right? I live on one income.
I think, I agree. I think it's funny how often we can almost take pride in hardship as well too.
Yes.
Like
we're like, I'm suffering.
It's just like God must be doing the most amazing thing because I'm suffering the most.
Yeah, and it's like, stop it. You just, what are you even like? You're doing it like it's like those gym fails where people are doing these exercises really strangely because it's hard to do, but it's like
you're gonna break yourself.
Yeah, it's like
you might die. Please stop.
You're definitely in danger, right? And then we have this other way where we think that, the same person could go either way, or sometimes an individual has a proclivity towards one or the other of wanting to suffer, and then also somebody who wants to avoid pain at all costs. Yeah. Right? Like we can fall into that camp as well, where it's like everything that is painful or difficult we want to run from, and we want to find comfort. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so the wise woman or man of God will be able to help us go, oh, no, this is definitely pain that the Spirit of God has you in for a purpose. Yeah. So when I was the executive assistant, I called my mentors and I'm like, this is terrible. I was crying. I was like, I'm a failure. I can't do anything right. This matters a lot to me, and I'm failing, and I don't know how I cannot buy a win, right? And I remember just the gentleness of his voice when he's like, "Hey, you're not a failure," and just hearing that and feeling the calming presence of God meet me in that moment. It was almost like his voice was echoing heaven's voice towards me. And it was like, I'm not a failure. And then he said, and David, I got to let you know, God's putting metal inside of you. He's like, he's broadening your shoulders. He's making your back strong so that you can carry the burden of leading your family and of your future ministry. And he's like, God's using this. Don't quit. Yeah. The same man, 6 months later, after a bunch of phone calls, the same man was like, it's time.
Wow.
It's time.
Yeah.
He goes, it's time to resign from that position. And so let's pray and seek the face of God for God's answer to this and your next season. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No.
So because he had wisdom and he knew me and he knows how God works, he saw a good thing being worked in me 3 months in. And he saw God kind of like, he saw like, okay, this is chewing you up in a not good way. And in his wisdom, he's like, it's time to look for another thing. But he wasn't going to let me leave the next thing without having an encounter with God.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it does.
So for the person who's looking for the easy way out, they like I would say don't ever leave a donkey mission or season without having an encounter with God.
Yeah.
And you've got to be with people who are gonna pull you towards that or push you towards that, invite you into that. Because only after an encounter with God can you walk into the next season with proper perspective.
Yeah, I get that. That's really, really good. I think that the idea of walking out with perspective and having that conversation first, I think that's something that people skip often.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to skip.
We prefer to do what we want to do.
And, because that's a prayer moment. That's like you said you were crying. That's an ugly cry moment. That's a repentance moment.
I was outside of our apartment. I remember we were on the 4th floor, and Megan's inside with her. 2010. So we had Audrey and Abigail, and I was like, I can't go in. I'm just like, like on the stairs, like on the back stairwell. So if anybody, like nobody ever came up that direction.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I was desperate.
Yeah.
I was desperate.
How would you suggest people go to God in those seasons? Because hearing that and knowing that desperateness and having those conversations with mentors and then him saying, you can't leave until you have an encounter with God.
Yeah.
Speaking from personal experience, in donkey seasons, I've been pissed at God and I haven't wanted to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, we got beef. And I know that's not right.
And he's not changing.
But we got beef. There's a problem. This is not okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you right now. I want to figure it out and I want to do my own thing. How would you suggest people, what would you suggest for people to soften their hearts and be able to go to God in those moments during a donkey season and they don't want to?
Wow, to soften the heart is difficult. I think that the Psalms show us that David took his pain to God, even when it wasn't what anybody would regard as like something that you would say during a church service generally. Like, God, kill him. Why is everybody getting away with everything? It's like, why am I the one suffering? And he brought these things to God. And so there's a type of prayer called a lament, where you start by acknowledging God and then you go into the pain and the difficulty that you have, or the injustice that you see or experience or feel, and then it concludes with a statement of God's continued righteousness and kind of a statement of faith that he's going to come through on the other side, right? I think we need to learn different kinds of prayers, right? We've done ourselves a disservice to think that like dinner time prayers or church service prayers are all the kind of prayers that can be prayed. And so I think talking to those wise men and women of God, but exploring prayers of lament, prayers of sorrow, prayers of joy, prayers of supplication, asking God to do things, prayers of adoration, just proclaiming the goodness of God because he's good, right? Like building in different kinds of prayers and knowing which tool to use in different kinds of moments could make all the difference in the world. I will say this, that a potential downside of, it's tough to call it a downside, but when you're doing life with people and you understand the importance and the significance of walking with people in a relation as you relate to God, sometimes you have the conversation with people that you really need to be having with him.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And I learned this because there was a difficult season of life, and I've got a great friend of mine, AJ. We pray every week, most weeks, and I realized that I was keeping a journal of the things that I wanted to pray with him about on Monday. So I just kind of like, if something was kind of harassing me, or if there was a thought or something I was believing God for, I would write those things down, and everything from finances to relationships to family to like the church, all the like everything. He's like, my whole life is just kind of open to him to stand with me, and but I realized one day while he was praying for me for the things that I had listed off and told him about, I said, this is really where I'd love for you to pray for God to meet me. I realized I had waited 6 days for somebody else to pray for me.
Wow.
For the things that I was needing to believe God for. So it's almost like I put my faith on hold until somebody else was praying. Mm-hmm. And so as he was praying, I was so grateful. But now I keep the same list, but now I hold it up to Jesus on my own every day. Mm-hmm. And so that when I get to Tuesday afternoons or Thursday afternoons, when we're on our prayer call, I've already prayed about this. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? Like I've already lifted it up to Jesus, so somebody else isn't the first one to pray for my wife. Mm-hmm. Somebody else isn't the first one to pray for my kids or my finances or Hope Valley. Yeah. But I've prayed, and so now he's joining me and not doing it on my behalf.
Yeah.
So I think a long way of saying sometimes I think the way to go to God is to be less concerned with getting all the way right and just to recognize, to know, to believe God. Mm-hmm. That he's given us prayer as a gift to engage him, and to trust God that when we bring him all of ourselves, that he's going to be kind, and he's going to be merciful, and he's going to be compassionate, and he's going to be loving. It doesn't mean he's going to give us everything we want. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean he's not going to correct us.
Yeah.
But it means that whatever correction he does bring is an expression of his love and his faithfulness.
Yeah.
That
makes sense.
Is it? Yeah. So
yeah, it makes it's the idea that we don't need to have it all figured out. Yeah. We don't have to be all the way right before we go to him. We can go to him with, hey, I'm pissed. We got beef. What? How do we get past this?
Yeah.
Like what's happening? Why is this going on? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Please help me.
Yeah. It's like, we got beef. How do we get through this? And you're not changing.
Yeah.
So what is going on? Like, what needs to change in here? And oftentimes we just don't see him well. Yeah. And prayer helps us see him well. Mm-hmm. Prayer positions us to hear from him. Prayer positions us to pour out our hearts to him. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not just about us giving, but also us receiving from God.
Yeah.
In that process of prayer. So if you're holding back because you're mad, I will say this. Last thought. If there's something that you can't figure out how to pray for, I have called a mentor and been like, this is a problem. It's a problem in my life. It's a problem with my life. I don't even feel like praying about it, but I know it needs to change. And I feel like this is a God-sized problem, not just like a change of mind kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Can you pray? Can you pray for me?
Yeah.
Right. And like, can you just pray for me? Mm-hmm. That I would have faith to pray.
Yeah.
And in those moments, just hearing somebody else's faith for my life, it's like by the time he's done praying, you're like ready to go, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, that's all I need. Like,
yeah, it's kickstart. It's like, okay, cool. All right, thank you. Kickstart. I'm good.
Yeah.
Man, no, that's good. That's really good. I have a couple more questions for you, but you talked about on Sunday that donkey missions don't always necessarily reveal a lack.
Yeah, that was a surprise for me in the studying.
Oh, yeah. I love that. That there's not always a lack that gets revealed, but sometimes it's revealing what God's already put there.
Yeah.
It's revealing what's on the... It really is. It really is. And just knowing that I can respond well to a donkey mission. Yeah. That a donkey mission doesn't always have to mean that I'm really being a donkey. Yeah. It's like, but so, going back to the Christmas Eve thing, we responded to it so well. It was just like, all right, cool. There was so in that season there was a level of humility and trust and all of these things that were already there.
Yeah.
But other times it's not been that.
That same donkey mess.
Yes.
Like on another day, in another season, in another moment.
Yep. Might not have been a
donkey's gonna die.
Yeah.
It doesn't clean up the mess.
Nope. But the donkey, we're gonna know what donkey tastes like.
I bet you Joe Rogan knows.
I'm sure, of course he does. This dude's eating so many different animals. But not having to wait for the mission.
Yeah.
I really think that the donkey missions I've responded well to are because I've gotten into the presence of God beforehand.
Yeah.
And it hasn't like boiled up to this, all right, God, you, me, we got beef, you're not changing, let's go. Like, I'm just going to wrestle with you all night and walk with a limp for the rest of my life type thing.
Yeah.
So how would you suggest people get into the presence of God and get that steel deep down inside of them, even before the mission comes?
I mean, I think you answered in your question. I think it's shoring up, knowing that a donkey mission's coming. So I think, well, so the shortest answer is my fullest answer, that you're following Jesus, like cultivating that relationship when things are good, right? Cultivating that relationship with the people of God when things are good. and helping other people, like serving other people when things are good. I think it puts us in the right place to endure a donkey mission better. But even with all of that done, we can get into those moments where it's difficult. I think I lost track of your question.
I'll ask it more concisely. I'll just ask what I wrote down. How do we get the closeness to God without the donkey mission?
Without the donkey mission. Okay, yeah. So it's prioritizing those things is how we position ourselves to be closest to God without a donkey mission. Because the donkey mission's coming, right? Like it's coming. But I think kind of inside of your question is, if the goal of a donkey mission is an encounter with God, like I think actually what I hear in you is a statement almost like, you're like, don't wait for the donkey mission, go to Jesus. Is that what it is?
I mean, that's
so
what
just
it
go
is,
ahead and preach it.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah,
I didn't see that one coming at all.
Because I think I feel I feel your question pointing at the reality.
I've had enough donkey missions.
We don't have to wait for the donkey mission to have an encounter with Jesus. We can do it today.
Today, right now.
Yeah.
I think that I've gotten caught up with waiting for this donkey mission as almost I've looked forward to the donkey mission as the proving ground. It's like, okay, cool, here's this thing I now get to prove it. But as I'm getting older, as I'm walking with Jesus more, walking with Jesus longer, it's, yes, the donkey mission's coming, but it's not really about proving it.
Yeah.
It's about getting into the presence of God. It's about cultivating that relationship with Him. It's about having a soft heart before Jesus. It's about having moments where you go to repentance, where it doesn't have to be this big thing. In fact, last night, Gabby and I had this really, really awesome moment where we had worship music on, and we just started praying. And it was this moment of prayer where we just laid ourselves bare before God, and it wasn't because of some crazy external circumstance. It wasn't because of some, hardship that it hit us. It was really just the moment that we took. We set an environment to seek after Jesus. And I feel like in that moment, I got so much.
Yeah.
The equivalent of what my donkey missions have been, where I've had to have those hard moments of repentance and gone through these hard things and been pissed off and angry at people and all different stuff. But it was literally 7 minutes of prayer that did the exact same thing.
Yeah. So as I hear you talking, I'm reminded of something I learned about exercise, and that some of us are the heart rate thing, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Some of us are zone 4 junkies. Like we don't feel like we've worked out
unless you hit zone 4 for the entire time.
Unless
4, 5.
Unless we're pushing into 5, even though 5 has no real benefit past 4. Like you just going for it. Like the highest height rate is the best heart rate.
Yes.
Right. The most sweat is the best sweat. The most gasping for air is the best. Right. And then you realize that. Zone 4. It's good to get into zone 4. It's good to push it that hard. But exercise at zone 2 and 3, is totally good too. And in zone 2, you can breathe in and out through your nose. You don't have to exhaust yourself, and you're still benefiting your heart. You're still benefiting your body. You're still burning fat. You're still taking care of yourself. You're still you will be healthy if you do that every day.
Yes.
And you don't have, you might not even ever have to go to zone 4.
Really? I mean,
right. But some of us, like, we're waiting for zone 4 because we think that's where it is. And I realized that as you were talking, like what you're describing is like a zone 2, zone 3 reality. That like, oh no, God's with us right now. I can just pause right now and have an encounter with his presence and talk to him about the things that are on my heart. I don't actually have to wait for the volcano to explode. And that's there's beauty to that. There's a saying that came from probably a book in the 90s about the pace of God is a walk. It's 3 miles an hour. Yeah. Like Jesus is just kind of like, he's inviting us to follow him at 3 miles an hour, but we're like, hey, let's make it hard. It's like,
why aren't we sprinting?
It's like,
my lungs aren't burning yet. We need to go harder.
Yes.
He's like, dude, calm down.
He's like, hey,
it's all good, dog. Like, relax.
Yeah. It's like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones and Men in Black.
Yes.
Like Will Smith is like running so hard to chase the alien at the beginning of the movie. And Tommy Lee Jones's character, he just walks slowly to the car and kind of pulls up alongside him. Like Will was doing the most and Tommy Lee Jones's character was just riding it out, like real chilled out.
Just like, hey man, you didn't have to.
You didn't have to do all that.
Like, have to do all that.
Like, I respect the hustle, but that wasn't necessary, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes we make it harder than it needs to be because God's inviting us to follow him at that 3 mile an hour pace, and we're like, but I'm really going to grow when it's hard. No. We really are going to grow when we show up every single day.
Yes.
And love Jesus.
Yes.
And
it's the constant of consistency versus intensity.
Yes.
We can get really intense for a season, burn ourselves out, and not want to do it anymore, versus if we just go a little bit every day, a little bit every day, a little bit every day.
Yeah.
And I think the cool thing is, like, now us talking about it, it changes what a donkey season is for us.
Yes.
If we're doing that on a regular basis, and there's going to be hard ones because he knows the things that we're not giving over to him, and it's like, you know what, we're gonna let's touch that. Like I love that you actually said that yesterday. You were like, is this something hard that I'm touching on? And everybody's like, yes. He goes, okay, cool, we're gonna stay here. Let's touch it. And I think that's how God is with us. Often, even so I say that to say, if you do this, if you are getting with Jesus on a consistent basis, don't get discouraged if a hard season comes.
Right.
Because obviously there are things that
he's getting
after something.
Yeah.
But even in that, I think we have a perspective of knowing if we are spending consistent time with him, at least sooner. We can see it sooner.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, he's getting at something. Let's sit down and figure out what he's really trying to get at.
Yeah. And there was some feedback this week after the sermon of people who were in donkey seasons, and they realized that they were in donkey seasons, and they'd been a long time.
Yeah,
they'd been a long time, but by living closely with Jesus and living closely with his people, like the reason that God was able to meet them is because they were walking with God's people.
Yeah.
Even though they were in a donkey mission for a long time. Something I'm going to say, here's a fast forward. This Sunday, I'm going to, one of the just ideas that's floating in my heart is that, like, even though we go through a donkey season with people, nobody can do it for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, like, you've lived with me through some remarkable donkey seasons that I've lived through.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it for me.
Yeah.
You couldn't go through the difficult land through me. You couldn't observe my past with me or overcome my excuses for me or make community for me. It's like I had to do these. So even though you were in my life, I had to do it.
Yeah.
It's like we walk together, but there are some things that we've got to do alone. And
yeah. You got to lift weights on your own. Like, if the spot does it for you, you're not getting the benefit.
Exactly.
That's why people get yelled at in the gym. Don't touch it. Yeah. Don't touch it.
Yeah. Like, I need this work. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's all the way real. So it's going to be donkey seasons in our past. It's coming Sunday.
Donkey seasons in our past.
Ooh, that's going to be fun.
Yeah. Because our past really does play such a significant role in how we understand the present and future as it relates to God.
Yeah.
And it's really not our past, like what it was, but how we relate to our past is almost more important than what the past actually was.
Yeah. No.
So
That's real, man.
I'm looking forward to that.
Bro, I'm looking forward to that. I'm
it's
studying it too because we got you.
Yeah, we
so
do.
We're
It's exciting.
doing all the things, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's all I have for you today. Thank you. This is great.
Thank you.
Always enjoy this time.
One last thought.
Oh, last thought. Are you gonna ask me a question now?
No, I should. I'll load one for you next week. You talk about not leaving without having an encounter with God.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate the power and the significance of an encounter with God.
I agree.
And
I agree 10,000%.
because many of us we didn't realize when it was available. Maybe we were around it and somebody else had it. So I would man, I just think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane was, I mean, you could argue that Jesus' entire time on earth was to seek and save the lost. He's like leaving the 99 to find the one.
Yeah.
Like Jesus was on a donkey mission to come find these donkeys, right? He was on a shepherd mission to get his sheep. That's not to use the biblical metaphor.
Yeah.
But it came to a moment in Gethsemane where Jesus had a vibrant prayer life, and he surrounded himself with people who God had ordained to walk with him and to carry the message of the gospel in the next season. So he had done all the right things. You would argue that Jesus did all the right things because he's God. He did it perfect. Like he lived it out. He lived the life out perfectly.
Yeah.
But he still ended up in Gethsemane, where he was crying out to God so passionately for mercy or for relief that he was
Sweating blood.
Yeah. So if Jesus is not exempt from a donkey mission and he did everything right, I think that we can expect donkey missions and difficulty, but in that encounter, the Father sent angels to minister to him and to strengthen him and to lift him up, and he stood up from that moment with the resolve to go and complete the mission.
Yeah.
And that's why the encounter with God is so absolutely important.
Yeah.
Now, we're not asking for angels to come minister to us. What we get is better than that. We get the Spirit of God who comes and dwells in us and rises up inside of us.
Yeah.
So we're not asking for angels to come minister to us, but we are asking for the comfort of God to come to us. So I think, in all things, Jesus is the greatest illustration, but especially in this moment, I was just realizing, man, if I could preach Sunday again, that's what I would talk about, how Jesus.
That's why we do this, man.
Lived it out, yeah.
So say it.
Yeah. So there it is.
I love it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
That's everything.
You sure?
Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Well, family, thank you guys so much for joining us this week. Next week's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about donkey missions in our past. We'd love for you to join us this Sunday. Y'all, it's going to be amazing. We're going to have youth breakout. We also have a youth cookout this Sunday, so that's going to be incredible.
Yes.
Would love to see you guys there. If you've got middle schoolers, high schoolers, we're having a color fight. It's going to be an absolute blast. So, y'all, thank you for joining us today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes.